What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Okay, so going through the comment section, one of the questions that I've seen a lot of people ask is, hey Rob, can you do the video where the son of the Hulk fights Juggernaut? Why, yes. Not only will I make a video where he fights Juggernaut, I'll make a video where he fights Juggernaut, and he fights Wolverine, and he fights the son of Wolverine. Because that's what happens in this story. So this was really cool because, again, this comes after the depowering of Bruce Banner. Not only that, there were a lot of people who are really skeptical about whether or not Bruce Banner was actually depowered. Now, the cool thing about this is that this comes from Greg Pak, and that's really how this went. After the events of World War Hulk, Jeff Loeb gave us the Hulk series, which was really like Hulk Volume 3, I think it was, because there were two other series before that called Hulk, but it introduced the Red Hulk, and it was basically just kind of a lead up. And so these series ran side by side. Think of it as the Incredible Hulk equivalent to like Action Comics and Superman. Like the Hulk story dealt with Red Hulk and all the events leading up to Fall of Hulks and World War Hulks. The Incredible Hulk dealt with the events involving Bruce Banner going up to Fall of Hulks and World War Hulks. And then eventually the Incredible Hulk was changed to the Incredible Hulks, which is really kind of a cool thing here. But nonetheless, there were two series running side by side because for Marvel, the Incredible Hulk, as it was written by Greg Pak, was just too popular to let go. Like Greg Pak had kind of solidified himself as like the definitive Incredible Hulk writer because people loved his story so much. I mean, he had great stories besides the Incredible Hulk. I would say Magneto Testament's one of the best stories he's done in a long time, where it covers the origin story of Magneto leading up to the time that he escaped the concentration camps and eventually took off with Magda. It was a really cool origin story, and I would love to cover that one day. But because of the fact that he was so good at writing the Hulk, he was a trusted name with the character. But the other half of this was that Jeff Loeb was wanting to go and do some Hulk stuff as well, and so they kind of had to run them side by side, and it actually worked out. It worked out pretty well because we basically got the best of both worlds. We got a new Hulk in the form of Red Hulk, and then we got the traditional Incredible Hulk, or at least as close to it as we could get with regards to the Incredible Hulk line of stories. Now again, because of the fact that Bruce Banner is basically depowered here, this initially picks up on a subway train. Now, this is not the most important part of the story, but I like what Greg Pak does here because it focuses on a lot of character, and I feel like that's one of Greg Pak's strong suits, is developing characters oh so well. He does it extremely well. I actually had the joy of meeting him one day, and he's one of the nicest guys you're going to meet, but he's so good at developing character. This is one of the things that I love. And what happens here is Banner is essentially confronted with what appears to be an abusive father. Now, the way the father is abusive with his son isn't overt in the sense that he doesn't just, start beating the crap out of him then and there, but there's enough warning signs here for Bruce Banner to be able to tell in terms of the fact that the father slaps his son across the face in anger, the way the father talks to his son. It's pretty easy to tell that he's a very abusive guy. And so what happens is Banner basically says, look, you got to stop, man. Now, of course, we know that if Banner had the ability to become the Incredible Hulk, he would have killed this guy. And in fact, that's what Banner says. Banner says, hey, look, you're in luck. If this were any other day besides today, essentially, I would kill you. I would break your legs. I'd probably break your collarbone. I'd break your arms. You'd probably never walk again. But what he says is, of course, well, he doesn't really say he's depowered, but he says, things being as they are, more or less I have to rely on my intelligence. And so what he does is he says, look, man, I've hacked your phone and I have all your personal information, your name, your address, social security number. I know what time you get up in the morning. And so what he says is, if you ever lay a hand on your son again out of anger, I will destroy your life in every conceivable fashion. Now, again, that's not the most important thing, but one of the cool things that Greg Pak does later on is he actually has Bruce Banner check in on this father to make sure that he's doing what he's supposed to be doing as a legitimate dad. So it actually comes out pretty cool. I really liked it. But nonetheless, this is effectively Bruce Banner encountering the rest of the superhero world for the first time since he was depowered. Now, this is really just kind of Greg Pak catching us back up, and that's really how this went. When it came to the Incredible Hulk after the events of World War Hulk, with each new story arc that was introduced, whether it was Skaar, whether it was Skaar fighting his father, it was really just the writers refreshing us on where things stood, just because of the fact that this was a very confusing time for the average reader when it came to the Hulk mythos. On one hand, they had Red Hulk and it was a title called Hulk. On the other hand, they had the Incredible Hulk. People didn't really know which one to read, which one fell which way, and how it all works out. That's one of the reasons why I put so much emphasis on making sure that the Incredible Hulk playlist was in chronological order, so you guys don't have to worry about that kind of confusion. You can literally just watch one video right after the other and be perfectly caught up on everything that's going on without really missing a beat. But because of the fact that they're all really seeing him for the very first time, there's a lot of distrust here. Now, the distrust is rooted in the fact that Worldbreaker Hulk could emerge at any moment. At least that seems to be the implication. But what Reed Richards also says is basically, I have secrets of my own. That's essentially what he says. Of course, he provides Banner with all the information they have on Skaar, because keep in mind, when it comes to the Savage Hulk and the Bruce Banner dichotomy, Banner does not always recall everything that goes on with the Incredible Hulk, but in this instance, He actually does, and we're going to find out that he's actually here under false pretenses. But what Reed Richards reveals is that on the subway station, he had basically grabbed some of the smartest people on the face of the planet, Hank Pym, Beast, Amadeus Cho, Black Panther, and essentially had them board a vessel, and they basically just jumped through and scanned his body on the cellular level inside of his own bloodstream. And what they found was that there are no gamma irradiated cells. Now, the reason why this matters is because this is basically Greg Pak saying, as far as we can tell for the foreseeable future, there will be no Incredible Hulk. Now, of course, we know that's not going to be the case. Like, we know the Incredible Hulk is going to come back, and it's a pretty cool moment when he does. But for right now, it's basically the superhero world looking at Bruce Banner and saying, you're 100% Hulk free, man. Like, you are 100% human. There's no mutated cells. There's no cells that have the potential to mutate. You're a regular old garden variety human being, which is kind of interesting. But, the other half of this is Banner says, hey, look, essentially, you haven't told me anything that I don't already know. I know everything about Skaar. I know where he came from. I know why he's here. I know he wants to kill the Hulk. I've deduced all this stuff on my own, whether it's through recordings, whatever it is that I can recall when I was the Incredible Hulk, all that stuff. He's like, the only reason why I came here is because I want to take my sword. Now, of course, when they step in and they try to stop him, he immediately teleports away. But Amadeus Cho makes a really good observation, and he says, hey guys, look, Banner didn't say, I want to take that sword. He says, I want to take my sword. And the reason why he says that matters is because that sword belonged to the Incredible Hulk. And so what it seems like, or at least the impression that Banner is putting off, is that for decades and decades and decades, for the entire publication history really of the Incredible Hulk, there was always this dichotomy, this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. The Incredible Hulk always wanted to be free of Banner, and Banner always wanted to be free of the Incredible Hulk. But Banner always had this kind of guilt over what it is the Incredible Hulk did. If he lashed out, destroyed a city, killed someone or somebody like that, he always had regret over that, and he always hated the idea of being the Hulk. But now it seems like he is really basking in the idea of wanting to return to being the Incredible Hulk. And so it really seems to be kind of a cool circumstance. But again, jumping back to this guy, Doug, again, this is Banner basically just checking in on him. This is Banner essentially just saying, hey, look, I'm just making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do, that you're actually being a fit parent, which again, it's not a great big huge moment, not the most important thing, but it is cool to see in terms of a writer just kind of maintaining their own continuity in a story, because it's very easy for writers to just go from point A to B to C and not really connect the dots to say, well, here we are now at the end of the story. Thanks for reading. Peace. It's very easy for writers to do that. But for Greg Pak, again, he's really, really good at connecting these dots. Not only that, Banner has basically also drawn in Skaar. He's basically, drawn Skaar in and said, hey, come to this fight. Come grab me. Now, the funny thing about this is that when Skaar shows up, he doesn't find the Incredible Hulk. He finds basically Banner's gamma robot. Now, the robot is effectively capable of absorbing gamma radiation. And when Skaar goes against this robot, he takes it out with the greatest of ease. He knocks the helmet off, and that's pretty much it. I mean, there's really nothing to go on here. But the cool thing about this is that Banner had basically brought Skaar here for a reason. He didn't engage him for the sole purpose of fighting. What he says is, I know that you want to fight Worldbreaker Hulk. Like, I know you want to fight that version of the Incredible Hulk that you've been hearing about time and time again. But he says, let me tell you something. If you were to go against him right now, he would obliterate you without a second thought. And, Banner says the reason why is because your actions on Skaar led to the destruction of Skaar itself when Galactus basically absorbed the planet. And not only did you destroy the world that the Incredible Hulk loved so much, you also led to the destruction of Kyra yet again when her spiritual form was imbued as part of the planet when she was using the old power. So you've effectively killed his wife again. And so he's just like, he hates you. If he were to come back and if you were to fight him, he would kill you in seconds. The fight, it would be over before it was done. Now, I love this about this story because it puts things into perspective. Like, it shows us how capable World War Hulk is. And the reason why I think that's important is because a lot of times writers will tone down other characters for the sake of a story. Inconsistencies and power levels are one of the biggest things that drive fans absolutely insane. When you have a character who can withstand an atomic blast, but then they're punched out by a guy with super strength, that doesn't quite match up. But with Skaar, it would have been easy for Greg Pak to kind of skip over that and say, oh yeah, it would be a really, really cool fight. No. He maintains that standard. He maintains that threshold of just how powerful World War Hulk is and says, hey man, if you were to fight World War Hulk, he would kill you so fast. The fight would be over before you even knew it started. You'd be dying before you really even got a few punches in. And so he says, my job here is to tell you that if you really want to fight Worldbreaker Hulk, then you need to be trained on how how to do it. You'd need to fight some of the most formidable members on the face of the earth, not just guys who were super strong, guys who are really, really capable, guys who are prodigious fighters, guys who are ruthless, cold-blooded, and the first person he calls on is Juggernaut. Now, this is so cool to me because I love the character of Juggernaut. This is not 8th Day Juggernaut, and I'd love it if it was. This is just, good old-fashioned Cain Marko Juggernaut. But when they call him in, when they bring him here, Banner tells Juggernaut, hey man, you like beating people up, right? Like you just like engaging in these ridiculous fights. Well, hey, you should fight Skaar. Now, of course, this works for the character of Juggernaut because Cain Marko just likes tearing things up. I mean, that's one of the coolest things about him. I mean, he has his own motivations. He'll kill Charles Xavier whenever he gets a chance, or if he ever gets a chance, assuming he's in the right mindset. But Juggernaut also presents a legitimate challenge for Skaar, probably one of the most formidable challenges that Skaar is going to face. And the reason for this is because, as we know, under normal circumstances, once the Juggernaut starts moving, he can't be stopped. You cannot stop him. The only instance that I know of where a non-cosmic entity was able to stop the Juggernaut was when the Incredible Hulk became a Horseman of Apocalypse, I think. And between the celestial technology and the augmented abilities, he was able to make Juggernaut stop once he started moving. He was actually able to push him back. That's the only time I know of that happening. Now, I could be wrong here, but of course, with this fight between Juggernaut and Skaar, it's really, really cool because it's Skaar learning some very valuable lessons. Not only that, it's Skaar also being pretty intelligent in terms of his abilities. One instance is he actually goes back into his normal human form and basically tries to play on the sentimentalities of Juggernaut. Now, Juggernaut doesn't necessarily have sentimentalities, but Cain Marko will rarely ever kill a kid. He won't really go out and kill children. It's not really his thing. Now, a lot of that's just because of Marvel's writing style. There aren't very many villains who are just going to go and kill kids. The only people that you'll find are people who are just wildly insane and don't really care about collateral damage, like Green Goblin. Green Goblin might kill kids, but it's not like he would go out of his way and throw a bomb into a schoolhouse. It's really just, I don't know why that's funny, but it's not like he'd go out of his way and throw a bomb into a schoolhouse so much as if he's fighting Spider-Man and he throws some bombs and they just happen to hit some kids who are at a bus stop. Green Goblin will be like, well, I mean, that's just how it goes, and of course it would give Spider-Man more of a reason to try to take him down. But with Skaar going back to his kid form, he uses the old power to send Juggernaut flying. Now, of course, the reason for this is because of the fact that he can manipulate the ground, but only so long as somebody's standing on it. Now, this is the cool thing here is because, with this being the newest launch of Incredible Hulk, a lot of people were jumping on board with these stories. And so Greg Pak was giving us an interesting story just as much as he was refreshing us with the powers of Skaar, because not everybody who had jumped onto the Incredible Hulk with issue number 600, this relaunch of the series, were familiar with the character of Skaar. A lot of them were just kind of new to what was going on. And so they were literally learning about the character of Skaar as they were going through the story. Now, because of this, we're also told that their powers really work in tandem, to a degree when it comes to Juggernaut and Skaar, in the sense that Juggernaut has to have a surface to run on in order to be unstoppable. He can't just start running, on air. It doesn't work that way. He has to have something to move on. At the same time, Skaar has to be touching the ground in order to manipulate it. And so it's just really one of these circumstances where you have two guys who both need the surface of a planet in order to utilize their abilities to the best of their ability. And so because of this, they're able to fight pretty well. They're able to hold their own. The ultimate blow really comes though when Skaar uses the power of the Old Strong and basically punches Juggernaut into space. He punches him into orbit. Now, I don't know what it is about Marvel writers and characters punching people into orbit, but for whatever reason, they're fans of it. They really like it. Spider-Man punched the Incredible Hulk into orbit, and Skaar punched Juggernaut into orbit. So it ends up working out. But again, continuing this role of being a kind of mentor for Skaar and having him go against some of the most formidable members in the comic book community, we eventually have him going against Wolverine. Now, of course, again, Wolverine is here more or less at the behest of Bruce Banner, but Wolverine is actually, and I might be going out on a limb here, and some might disagree with me, but Wolverine, I think, is more formidable of a threat than the Juggernaut is. And the reason why is because Cain Marko's not that bright. Cain Marko is just a blunt force object, just punching things and moving fast. Sure, he was a military guy, but he's not nearly as experienced as Wolverine is. Now, a lot of that's just because of Wolverine's longevity, right? I mean, he's been around for a few hundred years, for like a couple hundred years. He's not as old as Mystique, she's 400 or 500 years old. But for the character of Wolverine, he's 200 something years old. He was born in the 1800s, maybe a little over 100 years old, but he's got experience, with multiple multiple forms of martial arts. He's fought in a multitude of wars. He fought alongside Captain America. He's got his experience as part of Team X. He's been a spy. He's involved in espionage, stealth. Not only that, when it comes to him just fighting the Incredible Hulk, he's got a lot of experience there too. And so because of that, going against Skaar is not necessarily like going against the Incredible Hulk, because the power of the old strong is still a little bit different. But when the two of them are going against each other, Skaar basically takes out Wolverine readily fast. Now, the reason for this is that, again, Skaar is a lot more intelligent than the Incredible Hulk is. And I wouldn't go as far as to say that Wolverine was going in expecting to fight the Incredible Hulk, but I will say that Wolverine was going in not really sure of what was happening. Not only that, just between Skaar's experiences in learning about the foes of the Incredible Hulk, so on and so forth, while Greg Pak doesn't say it, I would go as far as to say that Skaar is aware of just how lethal Wolverine is. And it's one of these circumstances where it's put him down before he puts you down. Otherwise, otherwise you're gonna die. And so, he takes him out right off the bat. Now, it could also just be that Skaar was impatient, but the cool thing about this is that Skaar actually ends up encountering Wolverine's son, Daken. Now, the cool thing about this is something that I really liked, is with Skaar running off and going against Daken, where Wolverine initially steps up and says, okay, let's go take care of him, let's go deal with him. Bruce Banner uses his old power gun, which basically, instead of shooting somebody with a bullet, it shoots them and basically creates the effect of an earthquake. He's able to subdue Wolverine momentarily and says, hey man, you're coming with me. We're gonna let Daken fight Hulk. Now, this works out cool because Daken is in so many ways just like Skaar. He hates his father. He wants to kill his dad. He's wildly capable in terms of his abilities. He's got a healing factor. He's got claws. The whole 9 yards. He's just as capable. Not only that, he actually sits down and says, hey man, I want to give you a spot on the Avengers. Now again, this still takes place during Dark Reign. And so these guys, or at least Daken, is still working for Norman Osborn. He's still got his Dark Avengers. And so when he starts talking to Skaar, he says, hey, look, man, we have a lot in common. We're both effectively ripped from our mother's womb. With Daken, it was physically torn away, whereas with Skaar, he was just kind of thrown away. But they've both been forced to endure harsh lives in the sense that Skaar fought for survival and Daken was trained to be an assassin. They both want to kill their fathers. They both stabbed them effectively, when they first met. It's just really their lives almost seem to be identical. Not only that though, when Wolverine is sitting down and talking to Bruce Banner, he basically says, hey man, it's not Skaar that you need to be worried about. He's not the one that you need to be concerned about. You need to be concerned about Daken. And the reason why is because he has part of the Muramasa blade stuck in his claws. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, in Marvel Comics, there are different weapons that are capable of nullifying healing factors. Carbonadium is one of the most well-known, just because of the fact that it's what the tentacles of Omega Red are composed of. A lot of people know Carbonadium because of Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, where he killed Wolverine using a Carbonadium blade and said, hey, it disrupts healing factors. The Muramasa blade basically shuts down healing factors for a temporary amount of time. So think of it as, well, I don't know if there's really a good example for that, but I hope that gets the point across. It basically just turns them off temporarily. And so what this does, when Daken is fighting Skaar, his claws give him the ability to shut off the healing factor of Skaar and to effectively take him over, to simply defeat him. Now, of course, Bruce Banner steps in and Banner says, no, walk away. If you don't walk away, I'm gonna kill Wolverine. Now, of course, Daken wants Wolverine dead, but Daken wants to be the one to kill him. And so because of this, he's like, okay, fine, I'll back off. And the two groups end up going their separate ways. Now, again, this is all just part of a training session for Skaar. It was very real world and he could have lost his life to Daken, but it was really more of a circumstance where they just needed to kind of have things in order. And it was a chance for Skaar to learn just how dangerous some of the foes are that are out there. Now, from here, we actually end up jumping to Gamma World, New Mexico. Now, Gamma World is not necessarily what it sounds like. It's basically just this giant gamma barricaded place that nobody really seems to be able to get through. But we actually have Skaar engaging the Warbound. Now, initially, it seems like just some general conflict in and of itself, but they're actually playing football. And it's actually really cool. It's cool to see Skaar and Bruce Banner playing football because it creates this kind of bonding between the two of them. But not only that, it also gives Skaar the ability to just kind of cut loose. It's one of these instances where he can go against guys that can hold his own. He can go against A-Bomb, he can go against Korg, and they can hold their own in this conflict. But maybe it's just me, but it's just funny seeing Skaar play football. I really like that idea. The issue with this is that as Banner and Kate Waynesboro, which again, we had talked about her in the last video, while they're basically just kind of going about doing their own thing, talking a little bit, it and dealing with some of the past romance they've had over the course of the Incredible Hulk's history, we also learn that she's kind of caught up in this whole mystery or this whole issue regarding Leader. Now, Leader is a longtime villain of the Incredible Hulk. He's been around for quite some time. It's really his intelligence that makes him so capable, but not only that, he basically had this idea to effectively imbue a massive amount of people, a whole bunch of people, with gamma radiation and turn them into super soldiers. So it's almost identical to what it is that we saw MODOK doing in the story that dealt with the depowering of Bruce Banner. But the fact remains here that, in the midst of their searches, they basically come across a Harpy. Now, the Harpy, as is initially presented here, it seems like it's Betty Ross. And in fact, this entire time, Bruce Banner believes that it's Betty Ross. This gamma irradiated Harpy that's wildly dangerous. Skaar is able to step in alongside A-Bomb and a few others and effectively subdue it. But that's when we learn that this Harpy is not actually Betty Ross. Not only that, Bruce Banner, when he thought it was Betty Ross, was actually prepared to kill his son in order to make sure that he didn't harm Betty, because as long as she's in some physical form, she'll be fine. But as far as they all knew, Betty Ross was dead. I mean, as far as they believed, she'd been dead for quite some time. Now, we'll get more into that once we get into Red She-Hulk. But the idea here is that when this Harpy begins to revert back to normal and this gamma radiation effectively starts to wear off, we learn that it's not actually Betty, that it's Marlo, that it's A-Bomb's girl. It's his chick. And so because of this, it's effectively them being reunited after she had seemingly vanished. And so while all this is happening, we essentially have the Leader stepping in and, trying to conquer this group as best he can. But ultimately, again, he's just part of a background, because keep in mind, he's going to be a recurring foe when we get to like the intelligentsia and things like that. But then there's suddenly this alert that there's these giant, massive monsters that are led by Mole Man that are just ripping things up in downtown Manhattan. Now, this is not the most important thing that we're ever going to see. In truth, I'm not really sure what direction Greg Pak was going in when he chose to incorporate this. But of course, we have Banner, we have Skaar, these guys showing up here to fight against some of these giant monsters. But what we learned from Mole Man is that these experiments, these monsters, basically, these deviants, had effectively been dwelling underground, and they were all essentially freed when Worldbreaker Hulk started smashing through New York. And so I would say that as far as Greg Pak's writing is concerned, this is really just kind of showing us the ramifications for the actions of Hulk when he was Worldbreaker, that it wasn't just confined to him fighting superheroes and then imprisoning them and making them fight in gladiatorial games. Instead, there were these long-reaching repercussions from experiments that were created by Mole Man, from these monsters that dwelled underground. Not only that, they all effectively worship Skaar as their king because of the fact that they saw the power of Worldbreaker Hulk. They saw him as kind of this liberator, where he liberated these giant monsters from their prison, and he was kind of ushering them into the promised land, so to speak. And so because they view Skaar as their absolute leader, we suddenly have the arrival of the immortal Tyrannus. Now, this is where things start to go off the rail, because I don't understand what Greg Pak was doing here. This is kind of a struggle for me to wrap my mind around. Tyrannus was a small-time guy who basically stole the power of the Deviants. Now, I've had the different, discussions on this, but the Deviants are basically one of three classes that were created when the Celestials showed up on Earth and, began modifying human DNA, which would eventually lead to mutants and superpowered beings. They created the Eternals, which were like these heavenly godlike beings. They created the Deviants, which were like these, monstrous looking beings that lived underground. And then eventually humans would become superpowered beings, but that's really how that unfolded. But Tyrannus had basically stolen some of their technology and power, and then saw himself as this major foe going against the Incredible Hulk. It really seems like Greg Pak is reaching to a lot of the older stuff from the Incredible Hulk and trying to bring it back. I don't know if it's necessarily trying to pay homage to the way things used to be, or trying to draw out, all these different things that made the Incredible Hulk great. I'm not really sure what he was going for here, but the fact remains, that Tyrannus is taken care of pretty easily. Not only that, Skaar basically says, hey, look, if these guys consider me their savior, then no one's allowed to kill them but me. And again, this is really just Skaar doing what he can to try to save the city as best he can, trying to act out the role of a hero. When he does, he's able to save things effectively. He's able to keep everything in order. When he's able to bring these creatures down and effectively call it a day. But it's also him learning what it means to fight for something as opposed to simply fight against something. Because in the realm of Marvel Comics, the way their heroes are written, when it comes to Captain America, Iron Man, Spider-Man, any of those guys, heroes always fight stronger when they have someone or something to fight for, as opposed to just fighting arbitrarily. Not only that, as far as the human world is concerned, this is the first green iteration of the Hulk in some form or fashion that they've seen since the Incredible Hulk is gone. Now, of course, they do know about She-Hulk. She-Hulk is always there, but it's really Greg Pak saying, hey, yeah, She-Hulk's nice and everything, but she's no Incredible Hulk. And so for them to see Skaar to say, okay, he must be the new Hulk. And then ultimately, it all really ends and it begins leading into Fall of Hulks, when we have Banner saying, okay, if they're all ready for the new Hulk, if they're all ready for this new Skaar, playing the role of Hulk and everything, then that's cool. And let's see if he's finally ready to go against the old Incredible Hulk. And so what this seems to indicate is that the Incredible Hulk persona is not gone from Bruce Banner. That for whatever reason, either it was suppressed or he had done something to trick people into believing that it's gone, but but in effect, the Incredible Hulk is still a part of him and it's going to re-emerge again. But with that being said, if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.